Hi, everyone. So, this week we're going to be focusing on chapter 11, and this is going to be about style and tone and how to use that in your writing. But before we get started, if you see me looking to the side, I'm looking at my stopwatch right now. I always say this. I would like to keep this under 10 minutes, but I never do. But I'm going to try. But if I notice that we are coming up the 10-minute mark or we're a little over the 10-minute mark and the end is still nowhere in sight, I'm going to pause, tell you all to go take a break, or you're more than welcome to continue with the second half. But if there is going to be two parts, I'll make sure, as you previously seen, to upload both videos onto Canvas. So let's go ahead and get started. So, why are we talking about style and tone and how to use that in your writing? Well, that's because your writing must be clear, concise, and correct if you want to have your reader, the audience, pay attention to your message. You want your writing to be digestible. You want your reader to understand your writing. All of this is going to help you be a more persuasive writer and is going to help the reader not only understand where you're coming from and understand your point of view, but also possibly sway your reader or the audience that you're trying to reach. So, the main purpose of this, we're going to be focusing on five stylistic writing goals: writing clear sentences, being concise, being accurate, using active voice instead of passive voice, or when to use passive voice, and using non sexist language. So, let's go ahead and dive into it. So, style is pretty much your unique writing personality, but it's just according to the textbook. I put the official definition there if you want to see it, but pretty much it's our unique set of conscious and subconscious choices that we make with our writing. Do we tend to use the same word? Do we have a favorite word that we use over and over? How you organize your writing, sentence structure, all of this distinguishes you as a writer from other writers. And tone is a major component of style. It is through tone is where you express an attitude in your writing. And it is this attitude that can help exert great influence over the reader. So on the right, you'll see that there are going to be seven different tones. I won't go over all of them because my biggest piece of advice when it comes to what type of tone to take as a writer, the biggest piece of advice I can give you is just read the room, essentially. So, for example, do you have to write something and you just need to send it off to two other team members on your team? That's going to be pretty casual because it's just two of your coworkers. So that's going to be a very casual tone. But are you part of a marketing agency and you are responding to an RFP to secure new business? So you need to send a report to a potential new client detailing all of the activities that you can do, what you can do for the client, your team that's available. That's going to be a very objective and persuasive tone because that's going to be very formal. You need to present data, you're comparing costs and information. So all of this, like I said, is just kind of read the room. What type of tone do you need to take when it comes to your writing? For our class, it's going to be pretty formal and serious because not only, yes, because this is a course, but this is business technical writing. So we are treating this as you are on the job. You are treating this as whatever you submit to me is what you would submit to your employers. So a serious and persuasive objective tone is what we'll be using probably. So, as you remember, we're going to be going over five stylistic writing goals, okay? And the first one we're going to be going over is writing clear sentences. So, we all have the same basic tools to shape how we form our sentences. This could be words, phrases, and clauses. We're going to go back, a refresher to middle school, high school English. So remember, sentences are built around two key components. We have the subject, the who, and the verb, which is the what, the action. Phrases lack a subject or a verb, so it must be attached to another part of a sentence, where clauses contain both a subject and a verb. And clauses can be independent sentences by themselves, or they can be dependent part of another sentence. And there are going to be four main sentence types. We have simple, compound, complex, and compound complex. That's a mouthful. But pretty much this is just defined by how many clauses the each sentence has. So for example, a simple sentence contains one main clause. He completed his work. He is the subject, completed, work, the verb, the action. A compound sentence contains two or more clauses, but is usually connected by a conjunction. So as you can see, he completed his work, independent sentence, but we're making a connection. He stayed at the office to begin another job. This is can be technically two separate sentences. He completed his work, period. He stayed at the office to begin another job, period. But some people tend to make that connection because it kind of just flows well. So I'm not sure if you can kind of tell, like, he completed his work, period. He stayed at the office to begin another job. Yes, two separate sentences, but it seems very kind of like a robot. So sometimes you just want it to flow. You want to sound like a human being. A complex sentence includes a clause and at least one dependent clause. So, for example, after he finished the project, that's a one dependent clause. He headed home. He headed for home. So, as you can see, like one can't live without the other, is how you want to look at it. And then a compound complex sentence contains at least two main clauses and at least one dependent clause. So this is just where you kind of have two separate sentences that are connected to another half of the sentence. So as you can see, after they studied the maps, they left the fault line, but they were unable to travel much further that night. So that's usually where you kind of have the same theme, two topics that connect to that theme, and then an independent clause. So as you can see, they're going to be different writing sentences. As long as you are concise, they make sense, you're not using run on sentences, you would not want to combine a compound complex sentence with a complex sentence. Like, you don't want to have like all three, all four in 1 to 2 sentences. That's too much. So, some guidelines about how to write clear sentences. So, the number one is always put the main point first. What are you trying to drive home? And you want to avoid passive voice and long, flowery openings. We will get to passive voice. But for example, right here, the first part I gave you like example of a clear, concise. But the original sentence is usually after reviewing the growth of the Cleveland office, it was decided by the corporate staff that an additional lab should be constructed at the Cleveland location. That is way too much, way too wordy. All you simply have to say is the corporate staff decided to build a new lab in Cleveland. Done. Easy. You want to focus on one main clause per sentence. Too many clauses, it can confuse your reader. They don't know what the main point you're trying to make is. Stick to one main point within your sentence that you are building. Um, an example can be just shortening your complex sentences into one clear idea. So just make sure, focus, keep track, keep your eye on whatever you're trying to get across and focus on that. And then for your sentence length, this can range anywhere from 15 to 20 words. But you just want to make sure you're kind of using a mixture of short, not only empathetic words, but also words, actions that are going to drive home your theme, that are going to drive home the message you're trying to get across. This can also help keep your readers engaged and also highlight key points. So, another goal that we're going to be discussing is being concise. So, this part is usually when it comes to editing or revisions. So, how do you reduce word count, verbiage without changing the meaning? And there are different ways where you can do this. So the first one is you put action. You put action in your verbs. This is where you turn very abstract nouns into very strong verbs, very action oriented writing. So an example I gave was confirmation of the contract occurred yesterday. A concise, simpler way to write that is the contract was confirmed yesterday. So it's just a small tweak. It reduces some of the verbiage, but you're still getting the point across. You want to shorten wordy phrases. For example, at this point in time, which equals now, essentially, due to the fact that can be because of. So try to watch out for you never want to add too many clunky, wordy phrases, and you want to try to simplify that. You're not getting rid of like the point you're trying to get across, you're just editing. You want to use short words instead of long words and then cut out cliches. So try to go for like everyday words. If you don't usually use a word in your everyday vocabulary, why would you want to use it in your writing all of a sudden? So, advantageous, helpful, we endeavor, we are trying, so it's a simple switch like that. Cliches can be ballpark figures. Last but not least, let's circle back. Instead, just use clear, simple wording. It's very easy. And the last rules or guidelines of being concise is you want to be direct. And the number one tool or the number one tip I can give you on how to be concise and how do you know if you're being direct is sometimes just read it aloud. You can tell when you are reading aloud some of your writing where you have run-on sentences, where it just seems like it's just rambling because you kind of feel like out of breath. You kind of feel like, oh my God, this is going on forever and forever. You can feel it. And I gave you some examples right there. It is possible that the samples could possibly contain rewrite that and just say the samples might contain. Quick, to the point. Another guideline is avoid there are, it is. So you want to make your sentences stronger by starting with the subject and then the action. Remember, always put the subject first. So a weak example is there were 15 people who attended, instead of, you can say right off the bat, what is the main subject? 15 people attended. You want to drive home how many people attended this workshop or this event. So focus on that. Start off right the bat with 15 people attended. And then kind of with, I feel like this is the same theme. Cut out extra words, delete redundancies, filler words. This is like in order to, just simply say to. You just want to keep it clear and straight to the point. Okay, we are at the 12-minute mark, so I'm going to go ahead and pause right here. Like I said, you can take a break or you can continue with part two, but I'm going to go ahead and stop recording for this one, and then we will be back in the second part. All right, I'll see you then.